Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Rudd Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2021 horror film titled Malignant. Now, Malignant runs for 1 hour and 51 minutes long. It is directed by James Wan. The script was written by Akila Cooper. The story was done by James Wan, Akila Cooper, and Ingrid Bisu. It is produced by James Wan and Michael Clear. It is composed by Joseph Bashara, the cinematography by Michael Burgess, and it was edited by Kirk Morey. And the stars of the movie are Annabelle Wallis, Maggie Hasson, McKenna Grace, George Young, Michelle Brianna White, Jean Louisa Kelly, Madison Wolfe, Janine Thompson, Jake Abel, Jacqueline McKenzie, Christian Clemenson, Amir Aboulela, Ingrid Bisu, who is also the wife of director James Wan, Ruben Pla, Josh Rutgers. Rounding out the cast, we have John Lee Brody, Dan Ramos, Paula Marshall, Zoe Bell. The character, our main villain character, Gabriel, was voiced by Ray Chase, but performed by Marina Mazepa, Andy Bean, and Patricia Velasquez, who I remembered her from the Curse of La Llorona. Anyways, let's take a look here at what this movie's about. So, director James Wan has returned to the genre that had made him a household name. After The Conjuring 2, of course, he's done the Saw movies, he's done, Insidious, and a few others. Wan had ventured into other genres to showcase just how versatile he really is. But of course, things didn't really go as planned. Yeah, okay, he had some success with Fast and the Furious 7. I don't think he did quite well with the Aquaman movie. So, after being outside of the horror genre to expand his horizons in other movies, it is the horror genre that has reopened the door for him. But only this time, he's presenting a movie that goes beyond the parameters of the movies he's done before. I mean, movies like The Conjuring and the Insidious movies, they're basically all about scares, jump scares, and things like that. James Wan wanted to take the horror movie to an approach that goes beyond what he has ever accomplished in his decade and a half long in the movie industry. And it's always, and then, I say that as a positive thing because, we all like to try and experiment with other genres to see how far it could take us, to see what limit it could take us to. That way he doesn't be stuck doing the same bullshit over and over again. He doesn't care whether it will make him or break him. But he's going to go out and he's going to try and do anything possible to exhibit just how versatile he could be, whether he succeeds or fails. I think this movie was proven to be a great success because this is a movie I have that has been around for a while, but I haven't seen it executed so well in such a long, long time. So the story opens in 1993, where Dr. Florence Weaver, played by Jacqueline McKenzie, is doing some sort of a recording kind of like some kind of recorded journal based on her latest test subject, who is turning out to be much more of a handful than she ever thought. I mean, this is not just a handful. This is basically some kind of overwhelming situation that is beyond repairs and that is beyond their control. So Dr. Weaver, along with her co-workers, Dr. Victor Fields, played by Christian Clemenson, and Dr. John Gregory, played by Amir Aboulela, they are like watching over a psychologically scarred patient by the name of Gabriel, performed by Marina Mazepa and voiced by Ray Chase. But this scarred patient is more than just some unhinged patient who's a bad little boy. No. Who deserves a slap on the wrist. No. This hideous entity seems to have superhuman powers, incredible strength, incredible range. He's quite very quick on his feet. He's got very strong reflexes. And he could take out 10, 20 people in less than a second if given the chance. So this guy is no ordinary patient. He has the capabilities to also manipulate with electricity. He could speak his thoughts through radio transmitters. How does he do it? I don't know. There's no real clear answer of any of the characters' motives for that matter. But especially Gabriel, who could talk his mind through radio transmitters. He can toss around 10, 20, 30 people in a flash. He could throw weapons around with the greatest of range. And he also seems to be quite very strong in strength in spite of his physical outlook. And you know, this character is quite the sight for sore eyes. So one day Gabriel goes on an unhinged frenzy and kills many of the staff along the way. I mean, just from the opening scenes, it's brutal. I mean, he's just tearing away at people. I mean, I think in just a matter of the cold opening, which was about 5-10 minutes long, he's already killed about a bunch of people faster than an eye blink. Faster than the blink of an eye. There you go. I knew I was going to get to that quote right somehow. So then we cut to modern times and we are introduced to Madison Lake Mitchell, played by Annabelle Wallis. And she is pregnant. She comes home to her little suburban cottage just outside of Seattle. Yeah, they made it clear that the setting was in Seattle because, you know, we saw the Space Needle. And of course, as you all know, the Space Needle is one of the most obvious landmarks in the United States that indicates where this movie is set. Anyhow, so Maddie is pregnant. I mean, we see a room where we see like a cradle and other sorts of baby stuff. And it appears she's pregnant. Now, sadly, she has not had a great track record in giving birth. And it's kind of unfortunate, and it is very unfortunate, that she has actually suffered 2 consecutive miscarriages in less than 2 years. And if you think that's bad, she's also living with a very abusive husband named Derek, played by Jake Abel. I mean, they get into a little bit of a conflict, which leads to him, being just a big ass dick to Maddie. Blaming her for these miscarriages. The conflict gets much more louder and more aggressive, to the point where Derek uses his strength and he brutally pushes Madison against the wall, causing her head to bleed. And I guess this is actually the catalyst of letting the animal out of the bag. She ricochets through the wall. Derek, of course, is trying to be all apologetic. You know what? Fuck Derek. I had no sympathy for him at all. Derek goes downstairs to sleep on the couch when really he should have been just kicked out of the house because he was an asshole. But hey, at least karma does come to him. Even if it comes as a rather brutal thing. But you know what? Fuck him. I'm glad he died early in this movie. So as he wakes up, he notices the blender going off on his own. The refrigerator door opens. All of a sudden the TV's on and we see like this dark, shadowy entity. So at first glance, we thought this was another one of those like paranormal activity type James Wan movies. The things that you have seen in The Conjuring and a few other movies like that. But then as time goes on, once the entity decides to stop circle jerking around Derek, then all of a sudden he gets annihilated in one of the more unusual, unorthodox fashion. I mean, I think his neck snaps. And then we cut to him in the morgue where they do autopsies on him. And it was revealed that Derek and Maddie have been in many physical confrontations. And of course they decide to pin it on Madison for his death. But they let it go on account that they think that it may have been just due to self-defense. So when Madison awakens after being knocked out, she sees that Derek has been killed and that the invader is still lurking around. The intruder then attacks Madison, which is the pinpoint of events that leads to the connections between Gabriel and Madison. Of course, this Gabriel and Madison definitely have a strong bonding that goes even beyond the point of just, her and her imaginary friend. It turns out that Gabriel is all the more real and all the more obvious. As time goes on, there's still a bit of that like CSI criminal investigative scenes, especially involving our two leading detectives. Detective Kakoa Shaw, played by George Young, and Detective Regina Moss, played by Michole Brianna White. There's a little bit of that. A lot of it is camp. A lot of it is just way pure camp. Being the fact that this movie seems to just play off with as much cliches that you would expect to see in a horror film. We lead to the question, was Madison behind all these killings or not? Was there something else that's evil, that's lurking around, that's doing her biddings? Is it I mean, we also have, of course, other cliches like like the passive aggressive cops who will just like do nothing but to just blame everything on Maddie for all the deaths that have happened. And the thing about Gabriel is that not only does he goes out and kills people, but he also brings Maddie along for the ride as either her just watching him do his evil stuff, or does she have a lot more connection and meets the eye? Well, as it turns out, Gabriel and Madison are very close. And I do mean very close. It appears as though as if Gabriel is actually nothing more than a parasitic conjoined twin to Madison. You know? And Gabriel and Madison are actually conjoined to the brain, which means that Gabriel can take full control of Madison, which explains kind of why Madison always seems to wind up in other people's houses. And why she has to be the witness to Gabriel's evil deeds, including killing those who have stood in his way, whether they truly fully deserved it or not. Anyone who has done him wrong is totally fucked. We also have, of course, the dry humor. Because even though this movie was played mostly for horror, there is a lot of dry humor implemented into this movie, which really, really is proven effective. I mean, it's just a real wild, crazy ride. And I think it's just something that James Wan wanted to do. He wanted to create a horror movie that felt kind of reminiscent to the old 80s slasher movies that we have grown to adorn. And who knows, maybe it's time that we all introduce ourselves to a new movie monster. Someone who's kind of malignant. You knew I was going to come up with something like that, right? So James Wan kind of like plays homage to the 1980s Giallo films and definitely does get some inspiration from other horror films like Silent Hill and Basket Case. None of these are Oscar winners. Basket Case is probably my favorite example of an awful movie that's so bad it's good thing. And he comes up with an entertaining, albeit macabre film that's both original and provocative. Who ever thought of creating a monster that was in the manifestation of a malignant tumor? It's time that we cut out the cancer. Now, how did they actually remove his body from hers? Well, they couldn't really fully do it because if they went on a full-blown operation, it could have potentially killed Maddie as well. So they managed to take most of it out, but they left some parts of him inside of her psyche and stitched it back up. But after the whole situation between Maddie and Derek, where Derek's abusiveness got the best of him, took him out early, and therefore this is where all hell broke loose. Unlike other films that he's directed, like The Conjuring and Insidious, Wan decided to go outside the parameters of creating a film based solely on intensity, but to pay tribute to the 80s slasher films and make a horror movie that's graphic, grotesque, and painfully disturbing, and that is an understatement. I mean, some of the things that Gabriel could do. I mean, the guy wiped out an entire all women's prison, which sees them not actually wearing prisoner regalia. I mean, one of them looks like they just came back from a disco ballroom, like she's trapped in the 70s. And there was also this one who looks like she's sporting an 80s themed mullet. And of course, we had the stereotypical butch lesbian prisoner, which is quite appalling in itself if you want to try to break out of all the negative stereotypes that you see from people. But still, it does pay homage to the Giallo films that we are familiar with, especially the works of Dario Argento. They have all the tropes about the whole Giallo situation. From the earlier scenes, Juan doesn't waste time unraveling the beast that is Gabriel by way of framework and through his actions, which includes annihilating everyone in his path at Simeon's research hospital in Seattle. And we also are treated to cheesy lines like most slasher films from the past. This is definitely a movie not for the weak at heart, as fans may not have the composure to sit through all the carnage that's delivered here. I mean, sometimes I think it even went beyond the borders of these other slasher films from the 80s, like the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Halloweens, and the Friday the 13th, and whatnot. The introduction to Madison tones the electrifying opening to a more grounded moment that's handled very well. As characters from her life are getting killed off as she sees through her visions, while also watching Gabriel do all his evil stuff, Madison starts to question if these are premonitions or special powers. But the revelation does materialize later. That's far more interesting than that. I mean, after all the damage and carnage that he does, Sydney, played by Maddie Hasson, who survived from almost being crushed to death by a hospital bed, tells her that whatever powers he has, you have them as well, which of course leads her to saying that I could be just as manipulative as you are of me, and then she locks him into some kind of a prison of some sort that he's not able to get out. But we pretty much know that he's probably going to find his way out. And I think we're going to be due for another sequel in the not so nearby future. I'm going to say that Annabelle Wallis does carry the film very much and has become one of the more prominent scream queens. Wallis appeared in other horror films like Annabelle and The Mummy, and those films definitely are not going to be getting any Oscars or Golden Globes at any time. But Wallis's dedication in her performance makes these movies very enjoyable to watch. She takes you along on her nightmare the whole time, and she never lets you go. We follow her throughout, and we just like to root for her in every scene that she's in hopes that she, along with other people around her, can make sense of this whole debacle. And while at the same time trying to find ways to put a stop to Gabriel's wrath once and for all. There are other notable performances, which especially comes from Michole Brianna White as Detective Regina Moss, who gets the viewer's attention and questions the audience in this very dark, evil mystery. Moss, let me tell you something. She really, really provides some well-needed, cynical, passive-aggressive comic relief in a movie that is pretty much shoehorned that we have to sort of take it seriously because every character acts serious. There is no breaking the fourth wall or any other like over the top or subtle level silliness. The humor that is depicted is embodied in a way where people know that this is a parody, while at the same time will fool you into thinking that we're watching something that's not really a drama or a horror, but a comedy. That's what's unique about this movie. I mean, I'm not going to say, like I said before, this movie is far from perfect. And in spite of Juan's settings and props that have a big budget look to it, especially the asylum located at the edge of a hill, which is pretty scary, so to speak. I don't know if they were trying to go for some kind of Frankenstein and his monster situation. But, yeah, the settings are quite impressive for a big budget. I mean, everything looks big, from the grisly murders, Madison's premonitions, that look like big screen material. However, the giallo intentions and badly written dialogue doesn't do match with a big budget feel to it. There is a lot of atrocious dialogue that can come across as being quite laughable, although sometimes they could be a little crude in its demeanor. The opening scenes tend to feel more animated than evil and doesn't quite guide you into the diabolical journey throughout the rest of the film. It's like a cold opening, but it's played off almost like a short film. The film does not flow very well as the way it should. We go from captivating horror suspense scene like Madison scenes having a more intellectual edge to it, but then when Juan decides to go all out in monster movie fashion, especially in the last, which it's creative and exciting, which is creative and exciting, but doesn't flow very well. Because one minute we're seeing a moment of subtlety, and the next thing you know, all hell breaks loose, without real any fucking explanation or purpose. It shows here that Malignant has no connection to the Conjuring universe. We could see that Juan's reason for creating small-scale horror elements with a big screen atmosphere. His films are away from the horror film genres like Fast and the Furious 7 and Aquaman. Well, they didn't do very well at the box office. So his return to the horror genre was a way of getting through the door with a vengeance, and boy did he ever. You see a lot more blood and gore in this movie than compared to Malignant, The Conjuring, or Insidious, or whatever. The unique shots are definitely handled with precision and care, as it makes the movie more fun to watch, especially when Madison is being stalked. The police station scene will likely have you in stitches, and Juan is not only one of the best horror directors today, but one of the best out there, period. Speaking of note, on a technical level, I would have to give praise out to frequent collaborator and composer Joseph Bashara, whose music is catchy, even if at times it feels a little bit out of place. It's almost as if he's planned his music beforehand, and Juan just decided to arbitrarily, tune in. I'm guessing Bashar was expecting a dark, brooding suspense film. Instead, it becomes much more campier than horrifying. Hopefully, this movie will lead to a long-awaited comeback to the over-the-top horror films that grossed us out but entertained us in the end. In the end, *Malignant* really wasn't James Wan's greatest film he ever made, but at least it brought back a notion that horror is actually more light in its intentions and can be more fun to watch. To those who gravitate to intense driven horrors will be disappointed because this movie is not out to build suspense or intensity throughout and unpredictability. This movie's unpredictable nature stems from James Wan just letting loose, letting the assailant, letting the inmates run the jail cell, letting the patients run the cell ward or whatnot. It's like the insane educating the sane. There you go. It's not, like just a one-dimensional spook fest. There's a lot going for it. Though it may not decide if it wants to be suspenseful or a monster film, *Malignant* will keep you entertained throughout the duration. Oh boy, that was quite a lot to say, but as time goes on, this ends our writer review. If I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would definitely give *Malignant* from 2021 a 7 out of 10. So I would highly recommend you guys to see this movie. It does bring back a lot of memories from the slasher films in the 80s. Massive Q count, definitely not for the faint at heart. But I think for all those who are horror fans, will really truly enjoy it. So like I said before, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give *Malignant* from 2021 a 7 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Ride Riders saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.